my dad's first store got burned down to the floor.
Wow.
Businesses will give responsibility to people that have been there for a very long time, but they're not qualified. You got to find the best person for the job, not the person who's been there the longest. The biggest problem we have right now, in my opinion, is lack of staff. Everyone wants to work from home.
Why don't you just hire remote work?
Obviously, you don't build a connection with your coworkers. The best advice I can give is,
as always, I'm your host, Navid Rahimian, CPA. Kevin is a managing attorney of Quill Arrow, LLP. Quill Arrow is a superior law firm within the lemon law and personal injury space. I have the pleasure of serving them as their accountant in this role. And I've seen a great and successful journey from inception, and I'm so blessed to be a part of this journey. And I'm really excited to have you on and deliver some of that insight to our audience here. So thanks for joining. Last year, Quill Arrow closed over 100 million in settlements, which is an incredible feat. You guys, empower over 130 employees at your firm and more than 2-3 dozen of service providers that work for you. How in the world are you managing such an incredible load?
Every day you wake up in the morning, the alarm goes off, and you try to get up as early as you can because some of our vendors are in the East Coast. You wake up and the phone's vibrating. Like, as your alarm clock is going, the phone is vibrating. And, thankfully, Jonathan, who's my partner, and I have a very, very good understanding of each other's rules. And we have good people that work with us. And we've been very, very fortunate. When Jonathan and I first started our practice, it was in 2019. I was a second-year attorney. John was a third-year attorney. And it was right before COVID hit. And I'll never forget, when we started our practice, I just literally was a year and a half into being an attorney. John was probably in his third year. And we rented this shithole office in Century City, no windows, nothing. And I was licking envelopes, mailing stuff out. John was intaking clients. We were doing everything. And, along the way, we got very lucky and hired great people. And they helped us really elevate the firm. And we have people that take on different responsibilities at our firm, which allows us to manage, even vendors, our staff. There's so many moving parts because we have two different practice areas also. It's a lot to juggle, but I attribute highly to the people we have. We get in, and I can give you an example is I wake up and there's an HR report, and now I know what's going on with staff. I have someone who comes in who's letting me know where we are on calendaring. I have someone who comes in who's letting me know what's going on with our support staff, which we rely on very heavily in our practice area. And then as far as attorneys, I'm managing that, so I kind of know what's going on. And then John, on the opposite end, is doing the same thing with personal injury, and also making sure that, finances are handled correct. I know you work with John a lot about finances and vendors and all that stuff. So, it's a struggle, but to make a long answer short, we have good staff that help us.
Yeah. And I've I had the pleasure to kind of see that journey a little bit behind the scenes, and, some of the decision making that, you mentioned yourself, right? You guys started at just two of you in an office, licking envelopes, doing your thing. How did you guys muster up the courage to expand so quickly, rely on spending the funds? Because we all know we live in California. It's not cheap to have employees. To have these employees, you guys, I think within 1 year had an influx of 40, 50 employees,
Yeah.
and how did you guys have that level of comfort? How did you go so quickly to just say, hey, let's go, let's do it, let's not do it? Like, what is that mindset like?
Very cliche, but faith, I guess. John, my partner, is a very spiritual person, and he always says like, oh, this is God's plan, this is God's plan, this is God's plan. And he's kept that mentality since we started. And I'll tell you, like, when we started our practice, John and I were not on the same page as far as the spending. John was much more confident. It's changed now. But when we started, John was way more confident throwing money back into the business and building up upon, reinvesting and reinvesting. And I think in the beginning, we just were like, why not? Like, it seems right. Our partnership even formed like in a weird way. Like, John and I were not law school friends who were in class together and like, oh, we're going to open our firm. I mean, the fact that we even became business partners is just a random thing that worked out beautifully for us. But I think it just kept the faith, and we're like, what we're doing seems right. And we both had a crazy motor. Like, when John and I started our practice, he was still working at his old firm and I was still working at my old firm. Both of our bosses, though, allowed us to kind of have this firm on the side while we continued to work at our old place. So like, we had a lot of comfortability because we still had steady pay from our old jobs, but we're also allowed to start this practice. So by the time John and I actually were like, all right, let's put in the big bucks, we were like, you know what? Like, we know what we're doing. We feel comfortable. We have, thankfully, we got really lucky. John and I, we don't come from like wealthy parents. Like my parents, work super hard, but I didn't get a check for a couple $100,000 and go start my practice. John didn't get that either. We were literally settling cases and just putting it back in the business. And we settled a couple of good cases that allowed us to, reinvest actually. And, we just kept the faith. We're like, we're doing the right thing, let's go. And that was really what got us going. And we were both very motivated people, and we would push each other a lot. And so because we were operating in that way, we were consistently taking those risks.
Got it. So you talk about keeping the faith. I want to shift gears to maybe talking a little bit about some of the times where you're thinking, maybe, is this thing going to work? Like, some of the challenges, maybe like you could highlight a couple, because the uniqueness of your journey is that it happened so fast. A lot of organizations that get to where you're at, it takes decades to get to.
Yeah.
And I'm sure through that, you went through a plethora of some of those times where, it's just a mixed bag of emotions, going from, you're feeling amazing to maybe like you're ready to give up. So what is that like? How was that journey? Maybe focusing on some of those lowlights.
Yeah. I mean, we started our practice in 2019. We're in 2014. I almost feel like 2019 was just like a warm-up year. Mm-hmm. Like, I look at 2020 to 24, and like every year is like a chapter in a book. And each chapter, there's so much shit going on.
Yeah.
And each year of my like work life felt like 5 years.
I could see that.
Because there was so much stuff going on. And I mean, like, as far as like low points go, I mean, it's so funny because like when you have, like you said when we started, like all these employees, all these things, how do you maintain it? You go like 1 week of good and then 1 week of like complete shit. It feels like you're in the casino. Like, you'll wake up and everything's going good, and then the next week after, you have 3 of your best employees just quitting on you, or going or like you're dealing with like inner office problems, and you're like, okay, is this worth it? Am I ready to continue to grow this practice? And, so like examples of that is just like, your 2 of your coworkers, your employees fighting. And like, sometimes John and I will walk in and there's like HR just sitting there, and like, this person yelled at this person is quitting, this person, their resume's up on LinkedIn, and you're just like, okay, and we started our practice during COVID. It was so hard to hire. It's still hard to hire.
Of course.
I mean, it's an employee's market. It's not an employer's market.
Definitely.
And so like when you're like trying to scale your business and you're having trouble hiring, you're kind of like, what the fuck? And, you know, John and I, right now as we sit here, have such an amazing team. Unbelievable.
Oh, I've seen it.
But that took like trial and error up the ass.
Yeah.
I mean, we had some people that like fuck shit up for us in the beginning of when we started our practice. And like, I mean, there's stuff that I'm cleaning up today from like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Mistakes. And so like, you know, those are some of the low moments. And I mean, when you run a law practice, me and my other partner, Greg, talk about it all the time. It's like the triple threat of getting shit. Like either if it's not your clients giving you shit, it's one of your employees giving you shit.
Yeah.
If it's not your employee giving you shit, it's the judge giving you shit. And if the judge isn't giving you shit, then your opposing counsel is giving you shit.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, over last year, I mean, I can give you something that happened recently. I mean, when you operate a practice in lemon law, you're almost like stuck with your opposing counsel. It's like a little small pond where all your opposing counsel is like virtually the same. Like we'll have thousands of cases, but 20 different defense counsel, which is like insane ratio if you compare that to any other practice area.
Yeah.
If you run our personal injury practice, like rarely do we see the same defendants' attorneys. Rarely. And the plaintiff side, it's like unbelievably the opposite. Like I had drinks with one of my opposing counsel last night, and he's like, "Oh, we have 50 cases with each other," and that was a small number to me. And so, for example, over the summer, we had one car manufacturer basically change attorneys to one of the biggest defense firms in the nation to completely fight us on thousands of cases. And it happened while I was in Japan. I remember I get an email like, this new firm is taking over your cases. And as a firm that's like just, you know, I don't want to say is like young, but it is. I mean, it's a 4-year firm. I mean, obviously it's a really ahead for where it is, but that was scary for us.
For sure.
And you're thinking to yourself, like, you know, you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in overhead. And you're basically financing all these cases. We work on a contingency basis.
Right.
And then you're like, I'm about to go to war on thousands of my cases right now.
Right.
I have my employees' well-being. I have my life. I mean, I just got married a year ago. I literally have all these expenses. Like, how are we going to manage this? And there was days where, like, I remember during that period, it'd be like, I don't know, 10 p.m. and the office looked like it was 5. Not 5, 3. People were all working.
Wow.
Everyone was like all hands on deck trying to get these cases going because we had a huge battle. And, you know, thankfully we were able to weather the storm, and we're still, it's really made my firm grow up. And that's just how it is. I mean, when you run a business, any sort of business, and I've learned that from my dad. My dad had owns a discount store, which has so many highs and lows in that kind of business, because you have like Amazon, you have e-commerce, where he worked was in downtown. I mean, my dad's first store got burned down to the floor.
Wow.
During those Rodney King riots. So like, you know, having seen that, I realized that like business is just all up and down, but you have to, you know, keep the faith and, you know, weather the storm. That's it.
So what's your favorite, any favorite show point in the show Suits that you always resonate
All
with?
of it, man. I mean, I'll tell you, it's so funny. I went to law school at night, and it wasn't my first choice. I ended up doing it because I was working for my old boss, who's my mentor. I was working for him when I was in UCLA undergrad as a file clerk. And my old boss, who's also my cousin, was like teaching me like how to file stuff. And then like I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, something I always wanted to do. So I was always like trying to butt my head into like, what are you doing there? Can I join there? Can I watch this? Can I do that? And, he ran a small practice at that time. So I had so much flexibility to be able to like do a lot of these things. And he really empowered me and gave me a lot of responsibility. So like once I was applying for law schools, I loved it there. I was like, oh my God, I love working. I love working at a law firm. I love working for my cousin. It was like the best thing on earth for me. And I got into Loyola's evening program.
I remember, yeah.
And I wasn't sure, but I was so set on Pepperdine because it was by the ocean. I was so like, oh my God, this is amazing. I want to be by the beach. And there was like an episode in Suits where one of the characters, Rachel, ended up doing law school during the evening and worked during the day.
Yeah.
And I saw that and I was like, wow, like that actually doesn't sound bad. And obviously it wasn't like random. My old boss also did evening, so he was kind of warming me up to it. But seeing that, I was just like, wow, like I want to do that. And I don't know if that was the deciding factor, but it kind of pushed me. And I ended up doing law school at night and working at my cousin's law firm during the day, which without a doubt was one of the biggest reasons where I am today. Because during that period, I learned what it's like to be where I was last April, all hands on deck. Like I remember working with my cousin on like motion for summary judgment opposition on Christmas Day. Like I wanted to watch the Laker game, but like we woke up really early and he's like, can you come to the office and help me put all this stuff together? And I was. And we actually joke about it today, like recently about that. But, that part of Suits, I think, was very actually, a big reason why I ended up doing school in the evening.
That's super interesting. So you resonated with, who is it now? She's...
Not with her specifically, but that decision to...
Yeah, no, it makes sense though.
Yeah.
I mean, I see it too, because I remember when you were in school... you were working at the same time, and like relative to your peers, I was like, holy shit, man, how the hell is he even doing this? Because your program was what? It was a 4-year program? Because it was longer, because it was night school. No?
So it's supposed to be a 4-year.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to do it in a 3.5 because the school let you finish half a semester early if you took summer classes, which I took advantage of because I wanted to get the hell out of there. But the first year was rough. It would be like, I remember I would wake up. I lived at my parents' in the valley. I would wake up. I'd hit the gym at like 7 till 8. I would shower. I would try to get to the office by 9 in Beverly Hills. I'd work from 9 to 4. I'd go from 4 to 4:30, 4:45, depending on traffic, from Beverly Hills to Loyola. I would study from 4:45 to 6, and I'd have class from 6 to 10.
No.
And that was my schedule my first year, Monday through Thursday. Fridays I would study, and Saturday and Sunday I would study because I didn't have time to study during the day. It was pretty wild. But it was good. I mean, it was such a different experience because when you do law school in the evening, you're not with people your age.
Yeah, most people has like a life or day job.
I had a high school teacher in my class.
Wow.
It'd be teach high school, and then he'd go to law school at night. It was actually really reflective on what my life was like during those years in law school. I was always with older people.
So what do you think, sitting here today, as you're breaking for the weekend, what would be probably the most challenging struggle you kind of want to break through for your firm right now?
The biggest problem we have right now, in my opinion, is lack of staff. And I think that's a problem that we can fix. And, it's hard. I mean, everyone wants to work from home.
Why don't you just hire remote workers?
I don't believe in it. I don't believe people think I'm crazy. I just don't believe in it. And I challenge anyone who tells me otherwise. I mean, listen, look, you've been at a firm for like, I don't know, 8 years, and you've been there, sure, you can work from home 3-2, 3 days in the office, 2 days out. That's fine.
Hybrid mode. Okay.
Hybrid.
Yeah.
But if you've been in this, if you can't get hired and then just start working from home. I don't believe in that.
Why? Do you just what's
How?
what is it that you can't do at home that you could do at the office?
You come into the office. Your first day at my firm is you're meeting everybody. Someone is literally walking you around and trying to introduce you to as much people that you're going to work with.
Okay.
So what can you not do at home? Obviously, you don't build a connection with your coworkers. That's one. Two, you're in the trenches with each other. Like, that goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not saying this to be like, oh, people are lazy. They're going to go home and fuck around at home. Look, naturally, you're going to not work as much at home. I know
I agree with that.
Listen,
I just feel like there's so much distractions at the office sometimes too.
I agree with you. There are distractions in the office, and there are like some days where, like, I'll give you an example. My partner Greg works at home on Wednesdays, and he says he gets so much shit done on Wednesday, and I believe him, and I don't think he's wrong for that. But I'm talking about, like, he's different though. He's a partner at the firm.
Yeah.
I'm talking about someone who's still learning.
Right.
And I think also my firm is still learning as a firm. So I'd rather us learn together side by side than on Zoom. Like, when we have a question, you just get up and walk over to the person's table and say, hey, can you show me how to do this? How do you do it?
Slack someone?
It's not the same. Also, okay, hold on. I Slack people all day and they don't see my Slack because they're busy doing something.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Right.
So let's say you're a new employee, you're stuck, you Slack someone, that person is just not looking at their Slack at that moment. You've just wasted all this time.
Think someone who's a new employee and he's stuck, he's going to get an answer immediately anyway? What if there's that, it's obviously there's time.
I know, but it's different. Like, I'll tell you, like, the connections you make in the office, you could even look at the holiday part. Everyone at my office loves each other, for the most part. There's a sense of, like, commitment to each other. And I only think that comes in from working side by side with each other in the office. Going to lunch together, learning about each other's lives. It forces you to learn about the other person. It forces you even start spending time with your coworkers outside the office. When you're in the office with each other, it just naturally ends up being that way. And I attribute a lot of Quill's success to that, being in the office.
I think so. You put a lot to those intangibles you mentioned, meaning like those connections you make, and as a firm to be successful, a lot of times the activities that employees and staff do that gets them there are these intangibles. They go the extra mile.
They go not the extra mile. It's not even the extra mile for the firm. It's the extra mile for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference. I'm not saying, like, I need my employees in there so they work hard for me.
Right.
They work hard for each other.
Right.
That's the difference. That's the difference when, like, one employee is kind of drowning in too much work and the other employee picks up the slack for them.
Mm-hmm.
That connection and that like quick, like, oh, I got your back on that, only happens when you're literally across each other, sitting next to each other in a room, and you're like, God, I have 8 of these due today. I don't know how I'm going to get to this. And the other person's like, I have 4. I'll take 3 of your things. That happens being across from each other. It doesn't happen when you're at home and another person's at home. I don't believe in it.
Would want to challenge and ask you about how scalable you think that is. Because, first of all, obviously, it'll cost you less to have remote workers.
Right.
And then also, like, I feel like we're in a society today that demands it. There are so many employees, great employees, that, okay, maybe you don't offer a full-time at the office employment.
Mm-hmm.
You offer a hybrid model.
Right.
Where they come in and they build that connection on certain days of the week. And then there are certain days they get to work from home.
But, I think what you're saying is, okay, let me answer your question in 3 parts. Scaling. You're right that it's obviously more expensive, but in my opinion, the cost of in office does not outweigh the productivity that I think comes out of being in the office. So it may be more expensive, but I think the firm's profits based off of the work product that comes out being in the office outweighs it. That's how I view it. I'll give you an example on the intake front. I mean, I don't know, like, I think, fine, I'm not paying for this person's space to be in the office, but I think they'll sign up more cases being in my office. So it outweighs each other.
But I struggle with the concept because what you're saying has been said for probably the last generation, right? Probably the last 100 years. The concept of if you're not in the office, you're not working has been there. But COVID hit.
But look, if you look at all these big companies now,
Yeah.
what are they doing?
Some of them are forcing them back to the office.
Why
Not all
is
of
that?
them.
Most of them are. Why?
My perspective, I continue to believe it's an old school mentality, and I feel like they need to better invest in their operations where they can hone in on the productivity of their people to be able to work wherever the fuck they want. That's my perspective because I've seen it. I've been the person on the other side as well as an employee seeing the difference. And I value and I feel like the employee human capital values the ability and the flexibility in this modern day of age to be able to do that. Now, there are people that are like, you know what, I can't work an hour at home. There's so many distractions.
Yeah.
I can't work there. And that's why I believe, I wholeheartedly believe in the sustainability of the hybrid model. But I don't disagree with you when you talk about those intangibles, because I get it. At operating a remote firm, I see the challenges in the collaboration and the and things, but we do certain things like having these daily touch points and things that go beyond just work, that builds that thing. But yeah, at the end of the day, you're right. You have those intangibles that are best created when you're together. But is that the only way that's going to happen? I personally don't think it's sustainable. I feel like right now we're sitting in 2024. Fast forward another few more years, I feel like I don't know if there's going to be many employees that are going to be are going to accept a full-time thing. Look at Gen Z. Gen Z doesn't even want to work full-time. They want to work 4 days out of the. That's what it is. That's what we're dealing with. So how do we adapt with it?
You say Gen Z wants to work 4 days a week. Who knows? Does that end up changing?
Right.
I think we've had so many changes in like perception in life. These last 4 years have been a joke.
Right. It's
in the world.
Yeah.
Like you went from like not wearing a mask everywhere, not touching people, being scared to be out with people. Like that has a huge effect psychologically for a lot of people. And things have changed. And, we may recover from that and go in a different direction, or, it may become a new norm. I don't know. It's hard to tell. And who knows, there could be another pandemic in a year.
Right.
We never know what's going to happen.
Right.
But, I think as someone who's, developed a law firm that's had a lot of growth, I think that commitment to each other is the best formula for scaling.
Yeah.
Because that's like, if you talk to anyone who's in business development, that's like their favorite word to throw around. Scale, 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 scale. How do we scale? How do we scale? How do we scale? And, scaling, it's all about basically taking a formula that works and copying it and copying it and copying it. So What's the base formula? What gets you to the point of success? And all these companies that are, comfortable being hybrid and, kind of working from home and stuff, these are like 30, 40, 50-year-old companies. So they're not the same case study as a firm that wants to start their practice a year ago. You can't compare the two. You're going to compare a company that's had processes and things in place and people who have been working at a company for 30, 40 years. Yeah, it's easy to be like, okay, we'll be hybrid here. But you can't tell a company that is just starting, who's in their second year, okay, let's be hybrid. It's not the same. And so that's where I'll challenge you. You may be right for like if you want to work at PwC or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Company that's what? How many years old? Hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. You can have some hybrid stuff because they have all their shit together.
Mm-hmm.
But you're starting a business, you can't operate that same way.
Is there certain mistakes that you may have made where you said, maybe I shouldn't have delegated this task, or maybe how do you learn that balance?
I mean, the best advice I can give is a lot of businesses will give responsibility to people that have been there for a very long time, but they're not qualified. I see that a lot. You're like, oh, this person has been here for years, therefore they should be responsible for this, and therefore I should delegate work to them. No. You got to find the best person for the job, not the person who's been there the longest. And I can give you an example. We hired someone who's a controller. You met Lynn, who's
Awesome.
been with us for, 4 months max?
Yeah.
She handles everything.
Yeah.
Because she's really freaking good at what she does. And that's the mistake I see a lot of people do, is they take, this idea of like loyalty, and it impairs them from delegating to the correct person. And one of my other, mentors, Hamid, put me in a room and put on a whiteboard this thing, and it's like 1 to $500,000, $500,000 to $1 million, $1 million to $5 million, $5 million to $10 million, $10 million and up. And it was like a chart he drew. And he's like, there are certain people, whether you be your staff or your partners or your vendors, that are only equipped to work with you under certain brackets. And I didn't understand what he meant, but he gave me examples. Like, there can be employees that are perfect when you're making up to like $1 million, but they're not fit for business when you're at, 5 million and up. They don't have the skills to operate at that level. And I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but now I do. It's like when you scale in size, there's just a different level of attention and skill that's required from people. And they're under a bigger microscope, and you kind of see the faults, unfortunately. I mean, the goal of any business is to continue to develop. That's my mentality always, though. It's like, I would rather develop the people within my firm. Like, totally. I'm not always like looking for somebody outside to bring in, but there's just certain skill sets that cap out at some point. And, that I think is some of the mistakes that I've seen where we've caught later where like, wow, like none of this shit got done correctly. This whole way of organizing information was done improperly. We've caught a lot of those things because unfortunately we didn't have the perfect, the right person to do that job. And I see that a lot.
That's good. It's good that you learned from it, because that could be a really bad recurring theme.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Kev, I really appreciate you joining us, giving us your insights. It's been an absolute honor. I look forward to hopefully catching you on again and seeing the progress of Quill and everything going on.
Yeah, same to you, man. It's amazing that you're in, you have this platform and you've had a lot of good people here. I'm honored to be, part of this podcast.
All right, brother. Thanks for joining.
Absolutely.